So under theory of consumer behavior, I told you to go ahead and look at what consumer surplus means and what producer surplus means. So this is an area that is highly examinable. So they like asking you to describe what consumer surplus is in terms of a diagram, and we can actually see how that was asked in November 2016. November 2016 question 1C. November 2016 question 1C. So question 1C. November 2016 question 1C. So you're being asked, with the aid of a diagram, explain the concept of consumer surplus. So consumer surplus can be defined to be, so this is the difference between what the consumer is willing to pay and what he actually pays for the commodity. So in other words, we're saying, so the consumer surplus, so consumer surplus is derived, surplus is derived, so is derived where, or whenever the price of a consumer, so whenever the price a consumer pays is less than what he was willing to actually pay for. Is less than what they are willing to pay for. So what does this mean? For example, if you were to show this in a diagram, or in a diagram that you can see, so you usually have, so the consumer surplus, so let's say this is the graphical representation of what a consumer surplus should look like. So on one side, you'll have the price, and then on the other side, you'll have the quantity. So we are saying that consumer surplus is derived whenever the price a consumer pays is less than what they are willing to pay for. So the demand curve of such an individual would look like this. So let's say this is the demand curve, and we have the supply curve. So we said that at equilibrium, the demand is equal to supply. So for example, if you were to name these points, so let's say this is the equilibrium point. So this is the equilibrium point. So this is price that is at equilibrium. And then this one is point A. You can mention point A. This one is point B. This one is point C, like that. Then this one, you can say this one is price star. So the demand for this commodity meant that the consumer was willing to pay at point A, but the equilibrium price that you can see is that he's willing to pay at, or he's paying the commodity at point P. So to describe what a consumer surplus is this area that we are saying so is this difference in what the consumer is willing to pay and what he actually pays for. So this is the consumer surplus that you're saying. So let me write it here. Consumer surplus. Consumer surplus. So in other words, the difference between what he's paying for and what he's actually, what he was actually willing to pay for. So so if, let's say this is the consumer surplus that you want to show graphically. So if this is that area that you're saying, so the consumer surplus is gotten by the entire area that is ABC. Let's call this Q. So AB C Q, A B C Q minus P B C Q. So the consumer surplus is shown by this area that you're saying here. This area that you're saying here, what he's paying for and what he was actually willing to pay for. There is a net gain to it. So this is that net gain from net gain of or producer surplus, or in other words, you'll find that it is being called the economic rent, of which we're going to look at also when you're discussing the concept of the theory of the firm. So the difference between these two, that is what you're saying, the concept of consumer surplus and producer surplus. So the same case applies. So for this one, for producer surplus, so this is what you're saying. So the producer surplus, it occurs or is derived by the difference between the amount the producer is willing to supply the goods for, and what he actually pays to supply, and what he actually paid to supply. So this concept of surplus is whereby you're saying that each and every one of them, these two types of individuals, will benefit. So it's derived by the difference between the amount the producer is willing to supply and what he actually is paid for supplying. Now, the vice versa is also true. So if this is the price and this is the quantity, so now we are looking at supply. Now it's not demand. So you have the demand looking like this, and then the supply looking like that. So this is the supply curve, the demand curve. So let's call this point also A. We're just using the same. So this is the equilibrium. This is the equilibrium that we have point P. So this is P star. So P star showing the equilibrium. So this one is, you can say this is point C also. This one is B, and then this one is Q. And then we have another point here that is called point, let's say F, point F. So the producer surplus is shown by the difference between the amount the consumer, the supplier is willing to supply at. So this is the price that you're saying. So he's willing to supply at this, but at the equilibrium price, it is much higher than at point F. So this area that you're saying here, this is what we call the producer surplus. So the producer surplus is that economic rent. That is the gain that he gets. He was willing to sell at this point, but he sells at that point. So that is the producer surplus. So this is the additional benefit. Can write there, this is the additional benefit. Additional benefit is the additional benefit to the producers. To the producers. So for this one, it is the difference between area. So this is area P star B CQ minus F Q C B, that area. So this is that area that you're saying. So that is the concept of producer surplus. Now, when you include these two together, so if you were to fill this place here, what that means is, so the total of producer surplus, so I hope you have this now with you. So the consumer surplus and the producer surplus, this entire area, consumer surplus and the producer surplus, what it means is that everyone is benefiting in the society. So ideally, this creates what we call an economic welfare, where people on both ends are actually benefiting, be it the consumer or be it the producer. So this is defined as the total benefit to society, total benefit to society, total benefit to society. So whereby the consumer and the producer are both benefiting also. So that is basically it on that theory of consumer behavior. So one thing that I'd like you to also look at is you can add there. So use with the aid of diagram, so this is an assignment with the aid of diagram. Discuss this is what we covered last time also, but I'll still go through it even in our blocks. Substitution effect and the income effect. And the income effect. So I would like you to try that. So this is, so the producer surplus, now that we have this diagram, so the producer surplus is just the, that area that you're saying. The economic welfare is the total of both ends. So now we look at another concept altogether. So the theory of a firm, So to give you a bit of a clue on these types, on this substitution and income effect, this is what we discussed last time, where in the event of an increase in price of a commodity, what does it do to the equilibrium of an individual? This equilibrium, what does it do to the equilibrium of an individual? That is the whole concept of the substitution and income effect. I want you to also try and see if you can reason out of on that, and then I will explain to you. So we look at another concept of theory of a firm, and this theory is categorized into two. So we usually start with the theory of production and also the theory of cost, costs. So in each of these subtopics, we're going to discuss how an entity is trying to optimize in terms of its costs and the returns that it gets. So starting with the theory of production, this is the first one, where we discuss the factors of production, theory of production. So remember that we said when you're talking about microeconomics, you're dealing with what you call the households and the individuals. And going by that, it is very important to understand what production means to economists and also individuals in the society. So production basically means, in other words, so production simply means addition or creation of utility. So you're trying to make factors of production satisfy a certain need or want. So this simply means creation or addition of utility. So you're using the factors of production to convert them into goods and services, which now would help in satisfying human wants. So, and you said that utility is that level of satisfaction that is derived from consumption of a commodity. So production can be categorized also into either form utility, price utility, or even, so how does it create or add utility? So you can say production can be seen to create utility in different ways. For example, one is place utility. So it can utilize the location or the location of an item and convert it into something that is of greater use. So this means changing of a place into, or changing of a place and changing of a place into greater use than it was. Greater use than it was. And then secondly, also another way it can help to attain this kind of utility, and then is time utility. So this is basically availing resources at all times to ensure that you achieve the goals that you want. So this involves making resources available at all times when they are needed. So this may mean that they create goods even when demand necessitates them to, and then also form utility. So this is changing the form of natural resources, form utility. This is changing the form of natural utility or natural sources. So natural resources to be of greater use. Remember, utility is that aspect of trying to satisfy human needs, or this level of satisfaction gotten from this greater use. So the levels of production are actually categorized into levels of production, can be said to be either, so the levels of production are in three ways. We have the primary level of production, also the tertiary level, and the secondary level. So we have the primary level. So this is also known as the extractive level. And this is where we have activities such as mining, also farming, and as such. So this is primary level. For example, mining, farming, and as such, also forestry and fishing and as such. And then we have the manufacturing, which is the secondary manufacturing and construction. So manufacturing and construction. So this means that we are converting whatever we got from the primary level into something that is much more useful. So this is conversion of raw materials to final products. And then this type of industries is, for example, the assembly industries, the processing industries, and as such. And then we have the service industries, service industry, which we call the service industry, which we also call the tertiary level. Tertiary level. So this one, you provide certain services to it, to the individuals to satisfy their want. For example, things such as hairdressing, those kinds of services. So what then are these resources that we are mentioning here, or the factors of productions that we actually use to try and satisfy these human wants? So the factors of production can be categorized into factors of production. What are some of the factors of production you know of? One is land, labor, and capital, and which one else? And entrepreneurship. So these factors of production are categorized into either labor, and when you talk about labor, this is refers to the individuals who work towards production of goods and services. So this is the, you can say the mental or physical effort by human beings. Physical effort by human beings towards provision of goods and services, towards production of goods and services, towards production of goods and services. Now, at the same time, production of goods and services, this labor has its own characteristics and its rewards. So some of the characteristics of labor would mean, for example, you cannot separate it from the owner. That is one of them. Also, it is directly connected with human effort, and you cannot store it. It's not like another aspect. You have to utilize it as it is. So another thing that we discuss also with regards to labor is that it has mobility, or what we call mobility. So under this, we discuss a concept that we call, so some of the characteristics include what you said. Characteristics may include, one, cannot be separated from, it cannot be separated from the owner. It is human effort separated from the owner. Also, you cannot, what you call, another one is you cannot store labor, highly perishable, in other words. You have to utilize the individuals as they are now. So, and then we discuss the concept of what is mobility of labor. So this is the ease of movement of this factor of production that we note to be labor. So this refers to the movement, in other words. So this is the first factor of production. This refers to the movement of labor from one area, or from labor from one job to another, or from one place to another, from one place to another, also from one job to another. another. So that ease of movement is what we're calling to be mobility of labor. So there are certain types of mobility of labor, and they can be categorized into, so these types of mobility of labor, this is just trying to understand how labor works. Mobility of labor is that one, it can be according to geographical mobility of labor. So one is geographical mobility. So this is moving from one place to another, mobility of labor. Secondly, also it may be occupational mobility of labor. This is where you are moving in ranks, in terms of ranks, or one profession to another. And then also, so this one is moving in terms of ranks. This one is moving from one place to another. And we have another one that we call the industry mobility, where you are navigating through the industry. So the industry or the industrial mobility of labor. Industrial mobility of labor. So what determines this kind of mobility of labor? What dictates how an individual can actually move this easily? So what do you think are some of the factors that influence mobility of labor? For example, geographical. What are some of those factors? One is occupational, where you move across the ranks. What are some of those functions or factors that may affect this, that may lead to you being promoted? One is in the event of training and experience. When you get training and experience, you can actually move throughout the or up the ladder. So these factors that affect mobility of labor include, you can only get a better job if probably you are educated. You have higher chances of getting that job also. So education and training. Also, another thing is, for example, if you were to be taken to an area that is not safe or insecure, then also that is another factor that will influence. So one is also in the basis of peace and security. Peace and security. Which form of mobility of labor does it affect mostly? This one. Geographical, correct. Geographical mobility of labor. And then also on the level of infrastructure, So the level of infrastructure is on the basis of the availability of good transport and communication. And then also you as an individual, you have your own reasons why you want to move. So also the personal interests come in this case. Also the personal interests of the workers. And then also another factor that affects this mobility may be also the social setup, which includes the language, religion, and as such, social setup, society setup. So this now means things such as religion, culture. So when you are explaining these factors that affect mobility of labor, think in line with the types of mobility of labor that exist. And then the advantages of such kind of moving, for example, if you get a better job, there are chances that you'll be paid more. So one of the advantages of this mobility of labor is that it may lead to higher income for the individual. Also, another thing is that you get to have more experience in terms of your skills as an individual in that industry. So this is in line with the factor that you're calling to be labor. So what then are some of the barriers that may hinder this kind of mobility of labor? So we want to exhaust fully the aspect of labor as a factor of production before we move on to the other factors of production. So the barriers of mobility of labor, what do you think are some of the barriers in this case of labor? What do you think are some of the reasons why people may refuse to move or to go in other places? One is, that is one of them. And then also, when you're going to another area, do you think it is cheap or expensive? It may be expensive. So the cost of moving may demoralize the individuals from actually wanting to move. So also, one of the barriers that is clearly seen also is on the basis of the cultural differences among individuals. You're saying that probably you will not fit best in such an area. And then also, in the event that you're saying, for example, education and training, if you lack the professional certification, so the professional barriers, or what you're saying, professional barriers. So for example, if you lack a license to practice in a different area, so in this case, you're saying, so the professional occupational licensing may limit mobility. So this means you can only practice in different areas, not everywhere in the world. And then also the cost of moving, and it's not easy to just uproot your life and live. So cost of moving may be high. And also the personal, the aspect of the personal ties that people have. So the family and also the social ties. Also the family and social ties. So, and then you can add there that also the international barriers, where some of them are adopting what you call a protectionism policy. So also international barriers. So that is on the factor of production that we call labor. And then we look at also capital as it is. So what is capital? Capital is defined to be that part of the community or an individual that is used for further production of wealth. So in other words, so this capital is that part of the community or that part of wealth of an individual that is used for further production of wealth. How would you reason out on that? Can it be a barrier to this mobility of labor? Old age, in terms of the personal, in terms of moving. So that comes back to also the personal reasons in terms of if this person also, you know, there's that age that you can also not be as mobile in terms of moving, whereby we have the working age. Yes, it can also be that, because most people do not necessarily want, that is on the basis of the natural abilities of that individual to move. And then, so the capital is that part of wealth of an individual that is used for further production of wealth. It's used for further production of wealth. Production of wealth. And what this means is that we use it to create more wealth, and we can actually earn something from it. So the reward for labor, the reward for labor is which one? What do you get in return for labor? Yes, the reward for labor is wages and salaries. And we're going to see how this is important in terms of determination of wages and salary. So some of the characteristics of this kind of factor of production is, one, it is a man-made factor of production. So this is a man-made factor of production. Another thing is that, what is the reward for capital? The reward for capital is interest, correct? So the reward is interest. The reward payment for capital is interest. And this reward payment also dictates the amount of money that you will dedicate to increasing production. So, and then also, it is a mobile factor of production. Also, it is a mobile factor of production. We've already learned that mobility is that aspect that you can move. So when discussing this capital, we usually have what we call capital formation. So that entails how you create this wealth that you'll use even for further production of goods and services. So the other form of a factor of production is what we call the entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship now means where you come up with new ways of, or the ability to organize the factors of production to maximize on an opportunity. So entrepreneurship, so this is the ability to identify a business opportunity and organize you identify a business opportunity and organize the necessary resources. To maximize this opportunity. So to utilize the opportunity. That will mean then you start the process, the production process. So in other words, when you're talking about this entrepreneurship bit, you look at what is the reward of entrepreneurship. What is the reward for entrepreneurship? Profit also. So that is the reward for entrepreneurship is profit. So the reward for entrepreneurship is profit. For entrepreneurship is profit. So whenever you are talking about resources, this one means, for example, the raw materials, how you convert the raw materials into finished products that will make it profitable for you if it is a venture. So and then the last type of factor of production is which one? Is land. So land also for this kind of entrepreneur factor. So this one is an immobile. It is immobile in nature, that it means that it does not move. So in other words, so this is a natural resource that we use to convert goods and to convert raw materials into products. So in other words, so this is basically, so these are the gifts of nature. Land is considered to be the gifts of nature, in which, so these gifts of nature help guide production. The gifts of nature, such as that are utilized for production processes. So you see, for economic aspect, for economics, these gifts of nature include soil, water, any form of that kind of resource that you're saying, and the fertility of that area. So it includes the natural resources that we can actually use. So the characteristics of land is that, so some of the characteristics of this one. So one, we have seen that it is immobile in nature. And then its quantity is actually limited. You cannot have all the land. So the supply is fixed, in other words. So it has a limited quantity. So that is, the supply is actually fixed. Is fixed. And whenever you're talking about land also, we usually mention that it is a basic factor of production, and its reward is also, so for land, what is the reward for land? Reward for land is rent and rates. So this one, the reward for land is rent and rates also. So these are the factors of production that guide production in an entity. So there are certain instances that we need to also consider when you're talking about how to acquire these factors of production. For example, what do you think are some of the factors that affect demand of each of these production? What do you think these factors of production? What do you think are some of the factors that affect the demand of a factor of production? Let's say something such as labor. What do you think is one of the factors that affects its demand? One is the amount of what? Wages they pay. So the price of the factor of production will affect demand. And when the price of the factor of production is high, what does it do to its demand? Does it increase or reduce? When the price of the factor of the production is high, do we demand more of it or less? Less of it, because it will increase our cost of production. So those are some of the factors that you're saying. So the factors that affect the demand, factors that affect demand of a factor of production will include, one of them is the price of the factor of production, which you have said. So the price of the factor, the price of the factor. Also, let's say if we are using this piece of land for an item that is, or for a product that is in high demand, will the factor of production be in high demand or low? We are using this land to convert it, or we are using these gifts of nature to convert it into a product that has high demand. Will the demand for land be high or low? It will be high. So that is also another, so the level of the demand of the product, or the level of the demand of the product of the factor also dictates this, of the factor dictates this. Just like what you're saying, if you use labor to make this kind of commodities, that is also affect the demand. And then also another thing is that if the economy is doing so well, then also all of these factors will increase in terms of demand. So also the level of economic performance, also dictates the amount of demand that will go into these factors of production. And then if, let's say, the government has certain policies that we are saying that for labor, we have a minimum wage that favors the suppliers or the producers. So if we have a minimum wage that favors the producers, will there be an increase in demand for labor or a reduction in demand for labor? If we have a minimum wage which favors the producers, will we demand more of labor or less? We'll demand more. So also the government legislations are one, also affect the demand. So the government policies also affect the demand. Government policies also affect the demand. And then also the nature of technology. For example, if our technology is so advanced, it is less likely that we're going to ask for or want the labor intensive techniques. So these are some of the factors that affect demand of a factor of production. And then just like what we were saying, for example, if an individual has high skill in a specific area and we need that person, then also the level of skill dictates the demand for such labor. If you are specialized in a certain area, that also may affect the demand of that aspect of labor. So also the skills required for the job. And by this we mean the higher the skills or the more qualified you are, the more demand you will have in terms of being taken up by these entities. So these are some of the factors that affect factors of production. And then we look at the factors that affect supply, of a factor of production. Factor of production. So what are these factors that affect a supply of production, of a factor of production? The same case applies here, that if the price of the factor is high, then more of the supply will be included. So it's just like saying, for example, if you know that you studying, let's say CPA, will make you earn as much money as you like. So it means then that more people will want to do CPA. That is the price of the factor of production in terms of the demand. If this aspect of labor is needed, then more of those people will study to be that kind of individual. So the price that people are willing to pay for that job will increase the supply. So price of the factor of production is one of them. That means that the higher the price, then the more the supply that there will be. And then going by that also, if we are using this, let's say, labor to create, let's say product X. So you're using labor to create product X, and the demand for product X increases. What will happen to labor? Will it increase or decrease? If more people demand for this product and we use labor to make this product, so to make more of it, will we need more labor or less? We'll need more. So also the demand of the product dictates the supply demand of the product, of the factor of production, also dictates, or demand of the output of the factor. And then another thing is that also, so also the level of education dictates this, because if you are more skilled, then so the level of education and then another thing that affects the supply of a factor of production is what we have just discussed on the mobility of a factor of production. How mobile of a factor of production, also. And then the same case applies on the government policies on taxation also. So the government policies on taxation, if they increase the taxes or the subsidies, then this will affect some of these aspects. For example, if they increase the income tax, it means then that you may have to pay these individuals or as such. So policies on taxation and even subsidies. And then also the size of the population, the size of population. People are more inclined to have a high supply of labor in an area that has many people. So another thing that we need to also know is, what do we mean by the transfer earning, what we call the transfer earning and economic rent. So when you talk about transfer earnings, so this is another concept, just under the factors of production, transfer earnings. So these ones, they are dictated to be the supply price of a factor of production. So this is basically, so this is the supply of a factor of production, or the supply price of a factor of production of production. So the price that you pay for supplying this factor of production is what you're saying. In other words, it's the minimum price that you pay. So it's the minimum price paid to keep the factor of production in use. So why is this important? It is important because it brings the concept of economic rent, or what you're calling to be the economic rent. So the transfer earning also you can add there and say, so this one is basically, for example, what you pay people to keep them at your job or at your employment. So the transfer earnings means the amount of money that you spend to ensure that this factor of production is still in use. And we will see that in a curve which we are to draw. So this also, you can, so it's also referred to as the price paid to secure a service. The price paid to secure a service and maintain it, to secure a service. And retain its current employment. And then also we look at what economic rent is. So economic rent, on the other hand, is payment to a factor of production. So this is basically payment to a factor of production that is more than this transfer earning. So payment to a factor of production that is more than the transfer payment. So in other words, what we said under the concept of the producer surplus is basically what you're saying here. So when you say payment to a factor of production, this means what the factor of production is bringing in. And basically, when you're talking about the economic rent, you look at it in terms of, for example, labor. So the amount that you pay for labor and what you get back from that individual is that difference is what you're saying to be the economic rent. So in other words, what this means is, so transfer payments or economic rent. So this is income earned from a use of a factor of production, or income earned from a factor of production. And this factor of production, it has to be an amount that you spent more. So from a factor of production, which is greater than the minimum, which is greater than the minimum earned, or than the minimum used to bring this factor into production, than the minimum necessary to bring the factor into operation. So let's use an example so that you understand this. So, so let's say a person is to earn an amount of 200 shillings a week. And that in that week, he manages to earn 1,000 shillings. So the economic rent is the difference between the amount that he has brought in and the amount that he had, or this amount that you're saying, the transfer earnings. So the economic rent in this case is how much? It is 800. So that is the whole concept that you're saying, that the income earned that is more than this transfer earnings. So if you were to show this in terms of a graphical representation, so this is what you're saying. So the demand for labor, the supply for labor, and then you have this point here. So the transfer earnings is the area below the supply curve, this area, transfer earning. Transfer earning. And the transfer earnings means this is the amount that you pay to bring this factor into production, while for the economic rent is this area right here. Economic rent. Economic rent. So this is wage. You can say this is demand, and this is supply, and this is supply. So according to, so this is the wage rate, and this is the quantity of labor. So we said, so this area is also called what? This area. Huh? Is it consumer or producer? Producer. Saying economic rent is also called what? Producer surplus. That is the whole concept that you're saying in this case. So so now we go ahead and discuss also another concept altogether, which you call the production function analysis. And in this case, we discussed the short run analysis, production function analysis. Now, for this one, I want you to have the knowledge of what we discussed under the theory of consumer on the basis of isoquant and yes, you can attest to the different points and then just explain what economic rent is and drawing this diagram. So for the diagram, it has like three marks. Then the definition and stating what it is the 2 marks. So for this production function analysis, we look at production in terms of either the short run basis or the long run basis. So for the production function, we look at the short run function, the short run period, and also the long run period, Now, to illustrate the difference between the one quantity of a factor is constant while the others are variable.
While the others
are varied, can be varied. While for the long run period, in this case, all the factors are considered to be variable. So refers to a period where all the variables or all the factors can be varied. So what this short run and long run period mean? For example, the raw materials, in this case, the short run can be varied, things to do with also the labor and as such. But for long run period, what you're saying is for the short run, something such as land is considered to be constant. For the long run, you can also buy more land in that context. So when you're discussing these two types of production periods, we usually bring on board the concept of the total product, marginal product, and the average product. So I want to show you how the basis of calculation comes in terms of the law of variable proportions. So when you're talking about the production function or the production period, so in this case, the law of, we can have the law of variable proportions. So this means the concept of the total product, the average product, and also the marginal product. So you can say it refers to the input and output relationship when the output is increased varying 1 unit. So in this case, you're saying it refers to the input and output relationship. By varying a single unit or by varying one of the factors of production. By varying quantity by 1 unit. By varying quantity, by varying quantity of a unit by 1 unit. So why this law is very important is that it gives us an idea that there are certain stages in which an individual can produce at. So the law implies that if one factor of production is fixed, so it states that if one factor of production is fixed, because it happens mostly in the short run period, this kind of law of variable proportion, and increasing units of a variable factor are added to it, and increasing units of a variable factor are added to it. What happens is that it starts to increase up to a certain point and then it starts to reduce. After a certain point, the amount added to the output, the amount added to the variable unit, the amount added to the output by each additional unit will tend to diminish. By each additional unit will tend to diminish. So this is what you're saying, the law of diminishing returns. It starts to increase up to a certain point, and then it reduces. So the law of variable proportion, this is, in other words, the law of diminishing returns. This is the total output resulting from all efforts of all factors. So both variable and fixed, both variable and fixed. And then, so the total product in this case happens to be the total output. And then you have the average product. So for the average product, now this one is the total product per unit of the variable factors. So this is the total product per unit. Per unit of the variable factors. And then we have the marginal product. So before that, there's a formula that we use to calculate the average product, and it's basically what you know. For example, for the average product, you take the total product over the units of the variable factor. That is Q of a variable factor that is being used. So, and then we also have the marginal product. So for the marginal product, marginal product is the change. So is the change in marginal product is the change in total product per unit change. In total product per unit change. Per unit change of the variable factor. So how can we compute these three types of products? So we usually have a table in which you can see this concept clearly. So it's just like what we had even in marginal utility and the total utility. So, but for this one, we're trying to see at which stage can we actually produce that. So you can have, on one side, you can have a product schedule. So you can call it product schedule, whereby you're saying, for example, the variable factor of production, let it be, let's say labor. So the number of laborers or workers on one side, and then you have the total product that they come up with on another. And then you have the average product on another one, and then you have the marginal product. So you can have those units. Let's say this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you assign certain values to the total product. So you say, for example, this one you can say this is 6. You can say it's 27. This is 16, or you can say 16 and 27. So such that it increases at an increasing rate, and then it starts to decline at some point. So 40, and then you can say this one is 40, this one is 50. Also 54, 42, and then 54, 42, then 40, then 40, like that. So I want to show you how this one is calculated. So for example, the average product will be the total product over the number of laborers. So this one will be 6. What about the marginal product in this case? The marginal product, because it's the first one, we won't have 1. But then the second one, so the average product will be 16 divided by 2, which will be 8. And what about the marginal product in this case? The marginal product is the change in total product due to change in the variable unit. So this is 16 minus 6 is 10. But you see, I told you if we had here 10, here we had 20, it would have been 16 minus 6 over 20 minus 10. It's just that this one is 2 minus 1. That's why it's 16 minus 10. That's the. Do not forget that most of the examiners usually use that in this kind of setting. So this one is 10, 10. So do the same for these other ones. So do the same for those other ones. And then try and plot a graph of output against these laborers. So you have output against the laborers, the quantity of laborers. So this is the quantity of laborers. So you plot the total product curve, the average product curve, and the marginal product curve. So when you plot the 3 graphs of total product, average product, and the marginal product, so at first they are all increasing at an increasing rate up to a certain point where they start to decrease. So when you fill this table, you're going to see that at some point the marginal product turns to negative. It gets to 0 and then it turns to negative. So this is what you're saying. So you have the total product that starts to decrease. Also, you have the average product. And then also, so the average product and the marginal product, which goes back to 0. So we can have this way. So this being the average, the marginal product, so you can have that it increases at an increasing rate. And then, so at the highest level of this marginal product, or at the highest level of the total product, this is the total product curve. So at this point right here, this is where the marginal product is supposed to be at 0. So you have something like this. So this is just, it's not to scale, but the idea is that at the highest level of the total product, this is where the marginal product is at its highest, is at its lowest at 0, and then it starts to decrease. This is the marginal product. And the average product cuts the marginal product at this point. So this is not to scale, but the idea is that, so at this first stage, this is what we call the first stage. This is stage 1. And then this one is stage 2. And this one is stage 3. Stage 3. So what is the logic behind these stages that you're saying? So the idea here is to know at which point is it the best to produce art. So for example, at the first stage, they are all increasing at an increasing rate. So it means then, if you're to produce at this stage, there is some resources that you won't be utilizing. And at the last stage, the total product is reducing also. So ideally, even this stage is not a good place to produce at. So the best place that the producer should be at is at the second stage, whereby he achieves the total product and the marginal product and the average product are slowly reducing. So that is the reasoning behind this, that at the first stage, so let me repeat that. So we are saying if the output is increasing, it means then you have not attained the highest level of production. But if you produce at this, then it means that there are some resources that you're not utilizing. And then the third stage, this last stage, the total product starts to decrease and the average product also decreases. So it is not ideal also to produce at this stage. But the second stage, this is the best stage to produce at, because you actually attain the total product, and at the same time, as the marginal product and the average product reduces. That is the law of these diminishing returns that you're saying. As more units are being added, at some point, as more units, after a certain point, the amount added to the output by each additional unit will tend to diminish. The law of diminishing returns. So that is the whole concept behind these two types of the production or the short run production. So in other words, to simplify this, so you're saying at stage one, the farm may employ more units because it is possible to produce more. So at stage one, the farm will employ more units. The farm will employ more units as it is possible to produce more. Because he has the ability to produce more, he will tend to increase the productivity at stage one. So it is ideal to produce at stage two, because if you do produce at stage one, there are some resources you're not utilizing. So the best thing is to keep on adding more units until you reach to this stage that you're saying, the second stage. So you can say a rational producer will not produce at this. Producer will not produce at stage one. And the reason why that is the case is at stage one, because some resources will be underutilized, because some resources are will be underutilized. And out of stage number 3, also at stage 3 is not an ideal place to produce art. Also at stage 3 is so at stage 3 it shows a decline in output. So this one, it shows a decline in output. And hence, a rational consumer will not, a rational consumer will not produce at this stage. At this stage. Because both the total product and the average product and also the marginal product is negative also. So another thing is that also the marginal product at this stage is negative. That is what you're saying. And then, i.e., the marginal product is negative or has a negative effect. A negative effect. So let me explain what that means. When you say a marginal product has a negative effect, it means when you add more units, what happens to the total product? It reduces. As you add an additional unit, it reduces. As you add an additional unit, it reduces. So that is the concept of marginal product having a negative effect. So the right stage to produce is at stage number 2. That is where the consumer, the producer is more likely to produce at stage number 2. So in this case, you can say a rational producer will produce at this stage, whereby the marginal product and the average product is reducing. So before it gets to the negative point, you can actually add more units before it starts becoming disastrous for you. So the first stage, this one is called, so this first stage is this stage of what you call the increasing returns. This first stage is also known as the increasing returns, stage of increasing returns. The second stage, this one, is what we call this a stage of diminishing returns. Stage of diminishing returns. They are diminishing, but they are not negative, or they haven't gotten to this point that any additional unit will start to make the product to reduce or decrease. Stage of diminishing return. And also for the third stage, this is called the stage of decreasing returns. So you may be asked to state the stage at which it is best to produce art. It's always the second stage, decreasing returns, not the first, not the third. So we have looked at production in the short run, and this is on the concept of the law of diminishing returns. Now, what about the concept of the long production? So this is the short run. So on the basis of the production in the long run, we usually have what we call the law of returns to scale, which we are going to see also when we are discussing on the basis of the returns to scale. And then at the same time, this area has been examined a couple of times that also we can look at. So we can look at November 2019, question number 2C. 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 So you're being asked, describe two assumptions of the law of variable proportions. What are the assumptions of the law of variable proportions? One, you have said that it happens in the short run. So, and by definition of a short run period, we know that at least one factor is fixed while the others can be varied. So one of the assumptions is, so the assumptions also, assumptions in this case, assumptions of this law of variable proportion. One, you can even have this one also, that the technology is assumed to be constant. Technology is assumed to be constant. So technology remains constant. And then secondly, also, you can use these factors of production according to different proportions. So also the factors of production can be used according to different proportions. Factors of production can be used in different proportions. Can be used in different proportions. And then you can include there that all the units of the variable factors are considered to be homogeneous. That means that they are more or less the same. All units of the variable factors, all units of the variable factors are considered to be homogeneous. So these are some of the assumptions that were being asked also in that question. So by explaining any two of them, we will have gotten the 4 marks. And then also, I want you to try May 2021, question number 7B. May 2021. Question number 7B. May 2021, question 7B. And also May 2019, question 4C. May 2019, question 4C. May 2019, question 4C. And also August 2021, question 2D. Make sure that you try these questions. They like also repeating some questions. And this is a very highly examinable area. So next up, we will look at economies and diseconomies of scale, which mean the benefits and the disadvantages of a company or an entity expanding. So that is all part of the theory of production, which we will complete on, and then we'll start on the theory of costs and markets. So there's more of the computation bit on the next part, which we'll look at also on the basis of the theory of costs. So try these questions, and then we will continue from there.